The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show, the home of Googlization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolf, and co-host Keith Campagna.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show, and thank you for being part of Googlization Nation. We continue to hope that everyone is doing well. We are certainly thinking about everybody on the West Coast in the fires, pretty tragic, and now we've got the Gulf Coast under Hurricane Sally. We've got the pandemic going on, but you're here. You're here on Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. So what we're going to be talking about today is something else that's quite relevant. Seems like it's out of science fiction, that we're going to be talking about contact tracing. And we've got a guest, Gord Zeilstra. Thanks to Keith. He made the intro. Fascinating guy, fascinating company. And Keith, if you and I were talking about have people having monitors, or take this scenario, let's set the stage, that we walk into a company and, we're used to, especially in, with privacy, confidentiality, violence, we need to check in. And so we'd have a signature. They may give us a tag to walk around the building. Well, now that tag traces our steps. And not only does it track who we are and that they can identify us, but it also, you and I are a couple miles apart at this point. But had this been normal times, you'd be sitting next to me. And maybe we need to get Gord's company to give us some contact tracing. You'd come in and I'd slide over. I guess I'll slide over this way, so it'll be right. You're right next to me. And the tracer starts going off because we're within 6 feet of one another. Mm-hmm. And not only does it track how close we are together, but how many seconds we were in contact together. And it's like, whoa, okay, that sounds like scary stuff. That sounds like a science fiction movie. And then we hear all the privacy. Well, I don't want anybody knowing that stuff about us. But on the other hand, that's how we get out of this mess. That's exactly how we get out of this mess. And just this morning, that story surfaced again about the wedding in Maine. Got an alert just a few minutes before we went on the air. And it's maybe about a month ago, and they've tracked 7 people infected to COVID who were not at that event. They had nothing to do with the wedding. Yeah. And there's 7 people now infected with COVID who were not there.
I tell you what, it's incredible to think that we're witnessing this in real time. And what I mean by that is there are answers. We've talked about this for a while. The answer goes beyond 0 or 100%. There's a middle way to get things done. And talking to Gord, I know his company. I know what his strategies are at a decent level. Me personally, I love what they're doing because they address all of the concerns, whether those concerns be privacy or containment of COVID. They do it in what you and I consider the most obvious way, the proper use of technology. And that's what we've been talking about for the last almost 2 years now, right?
We have been. I mean, this sort of accelerated the time. I talk with. There wasn't a whole lot we weren't anticipating that was going to happen, but it just happened a whole lot quicker. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people pushing back, just like they did before. Right? We would talk about technology and taking the humanity out of HR and the world, and yet There's a whole lot of improvements, and some of the we got to, I don't want to say we just got to take the bad with the good, but there's a lot of good things that can happen with this. And every year we're talking about another flu season, and the reason we talk about flu seasons is because people have lousy hygiene. People would come to work sick. Because they didn't want to lose a sick day, or they didn't have sick days, or they needed to pay, or they didn't want to lose a vacation day. So people came to work sick. You sent your kids to school sick. Daycares were literally petri dishes for infections. Right. And once it started, everybody in the family got it, and it just recurred. And we just took that as normal. And then you get COVID-19. Yeah, a really infectious disease. So we've got that coming up as well. There's a lot of other things. You and I would definitely want to get Gord into this conversation. But just this morning, it's just crazy. We talk about VUCA, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. I literally minutes before the show got off the phone with someone who's going to be our guest in a few weeks, Mike Raven and Ross Thornley. They have a company called Adaptability AQ. They have it's called Adaptability Quotient. They have Adaptability AI, and fascinating. They're working with organizations like Singularity University. I'm going to invest a part within there because I think it's a fantastic tool. And they're working with one of our old friends, Enrique Rubio, Hacking HR. They just introduced it there. So it's a fascinating tool of looking at adaptability, and it looks at both our ability to adapt, our character. Do we have it within us when we talk about resilience and other factors, and the mental agility, mental alertness, but they also talk about unlearning, which is interesting because that kind of leads into the other subject about unlearning being a skill. We talk about how we need to learn, but now there's every day I'm seeing this unlearning process that we need to unlearn what we did.
It puts a huge smile on my face for two reasons. One, to go back to what you just said, and then I'm going to hop back to what you said prior to that. In 2019, I had one New Year's resolution, and that resolution was I was going to increase one habit, and that habit was to break as many habits that I had in 2018. So the idea that there's this momentum building to the value of unlearning habits, recognizing how to build on those, and the outcome, I hope you feel comfortable with me throwing you under the bus here as a testimonial here. The outcome is that an improved me now exists because of the unlearning that I did. And second, I love that they're coming on to the show because just like having Gord on today, if HR really wants to get that seat at the table, they can't show up at the table with their hair on fire. They have to have ideas like the ones we're talking about on the show that can literally impact the business. And I can't imagine there being a better time than for our HR listeners to recognize that you can be a strategic partner, because now everyone inside your organization is looking for answers. And it's guests like Gord and the guys coming on in a few weeks that actually can provide them.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I want to be able to get Gord on right away. And maybe this is the setup. There was just a study. And again, looking at this unlearning thing, there was a study that came out. It was based on millions of people in the LinkedIn profiles that I'm just going to read it. 58% are not confident that they can find new jobs where their skills would apply. That's one. But here was the other part, is 57%, almost the same amount, maybe it's the same people, can't identify skills, what skills they have that they could get a new job. I mean, that's absurd. I mean, 6 out of 10 people are saying, I don't know if my skills, I don't know how I can apply my skills to get a new job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true.
It's crazy. And so it fits into what skills do they need to learn? What do they need to unlearn? Which means people need to adapt, and all this stuff just starts to spin into its own. But we can't get beyond any of this if we can't go out and apply for a job. And we can apply for jobs online, but what does work look like? And we're going to apply for a job, but I'm fearful of going to work because I've got kids, or I've got older parents, or I got to take care of somebody, or I'm concerned with my family. So I can't really go out and get a new job. So I don't know what my skills are to get a new job. And even if I knew what my skills are, I don't know if I want to go back. I want to work, but I don't want to go back into work.
Thank goodness there's the Geeks Geezers and Googlization podcast to help people with all this.
You got somebody like Gord whose company is able to solve the world's problem. So just we'll have him make an introduction, but I know you met him before you came on. You guys were passing back and forth in trains, planes, and automobiles, I guess, for a while.
Sure. Yeah. Gord is a phenomenal asset to his team. He's actually got a phenomenal story in terms of his awareness inside of HR on a global level. And I'm sure he's going to share with us how he got into Tracesafe. So maybe it's time to bring him in and get him to tell everybody how to not worry anymore.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the story I gave this morning about kind of walking through, they actually have in some of the collateral that they actually had this path of the individual of somebody coming into an office, and they sort of took the pathway. So I can't wait to talk about that. But Gord's company Tracesafe is working with governments, sporting events. I just saw this morning, and things happen crazy. Big Ten canceled their season. Now they're back on. Are they going to be showing up in events, and what's going to happen to all the students in the universities? And meanwhile, you got universities that are struggling with infection rates, and now we're going to have football. Crazy stuff. And national football season started, and we had an event where people were spaced. Most of the people seemed to be spaced appropriately, and most people had their masks actually over their mask or their mouth and their nose, not under the chin. As we say, I'm wearing my mask, but it's not covering the virus. So here we are. So welcome to the show, Gord, and can't wait to talk about it. What a crazy topic. And as I said, 6 months ago, I think everybody be up in arms. It's like, this will never happen. The governments won't allow it to happen. And what about privacy? And here we are.
That's right. Well, it's great to be on the show, and thank you for that, wonderful lead in and that sort of thing. It's certainly an amazing topic. I'm fortunate to be inside of the topic with a variety of different industries, and you've kind of talked about sport and government and workplaces and being around the world. I mean, this is something that's really not, it's one of these things that's not pertain to any specific individual, certainly not pertain to any geography, but rather it's all encompassing. And so it's been a fun, as somebody who gets to talk about solutions to, fairly fundamental talent related problems, my whole career, this is kind of dovetailing really nicely into an exciting day for me, and certainly today to be talking to you about this. So looking forward to it.
I mean, you've had an interesting background. Your background came from not in basically healthcare or contact, but HR tech. Correct?
That's right. Yeah, and I would say, somewhat accidentally in terms of getting into HR tech, I probably had more of an interest in getting involved in politics or musical theater as coming out of university. But it's amazing how musical theater and politics someday are very much like HR tech. I could probably take a whole different conversation on that, but no.
Back. Well, I'd love to have that conversation because your path to Tracesafe might be as crazy as mine, from dentistry to doing what I do. So
yeah. Well, it's this has been an amazing ride, and I would say my career started in the early days of the World Wide Web, being, one of the very first employees at Monster.com back in the mid 90s, and taking that through as a very disruptive type of technology that was replacing how people were looking for jobs, which was waiting for a Sunday newspaper, to certainly a wide open arena for how companies would advertise and talk about their brand through the new medium of the World Wide Web. And you kind of fast forward that that onwards. And, after I had done sort of helping create a monster, we had to curtail that monster a little bit with an applicant tracking system. And so this was the disruption of kind of taking resumes and profiles, from a filing cabinet into an applicant tracking system. And so I was fortunate enough to spend some great years with what would later be called Taleo and what would later be called Verve in much of my time throughout the 2000s. So I had a chance to move across the world, see how different countries and HR departments were struggling with that particular challenge. It took a little bit of a break and tried my hand at Canadian politics and ran in a federal election here in Canada. And so that was fun, but learned that I couldn't leave my day job, not on my choice necessarily, but lost that election and was fortunate enough to actually join SuccessFactors through a really exciting time in their history, both in terms of moving from performance management into a larger HR spectrum. And, so having spent some time there and living back again in Asia and seeing some of the complexities and challenges in Asia as it relates to HR software, I really got quite passionate about where HR technology was going in terms of really driving at employees' needs and the whole topic of engagement and culture and really this wellness conversation that was coming out of that. And so that whole interest kind of came at a time where, I was looking at certain ROI elements that companies have in terms of their people and building their people up through this. And have been kind of working with a number of organizations on that front. And then COVID hits. And, the very same things that companies are dealing with around culture, engagement, retention, and all those types of things are now thrown out the window, so to speak. It's kind of like, let's focus on the wellness of our employees. Let's focus upon, making sure everybody's safe. And when we say everybody, we don't just mean the people that are walking around with smartphones that can check into an app and answer a question. We literally mean everybody that comes into contact with our employees, whether they're on a shop floor, in a manufacturing plant, in a laboratory, as salespeople, as consultants roaming around offices and around the world. And while travel has also stopped, how do you actually think about those types of things? So this opportunity with Tracesafe came up. And it really was at an important time where I think companies are now faced with this dilemma of how do we get back to work again? How do we make a safe workplace thrive with the talent that we have?
And I got to believe, Gord, you come with a phenomenal perspective that is a key differentiator, because from my humble perspective, the people, the stakeholders inside of corporations, inside of venues, sport teams, et cetera, they want to know that there is a effort to protect the data, protect the people in an effort to keep everyone safe and not concerned that Big Brother is upon them in the year 2020, right? So could you share a little bit about the nuances as it relates to the way that the contact tracing works? Because you know this already, right? I'm certainly one of those people that is not a fan of surveillance, and we've, what's his name? Edward Snowden just got let go, or what's it called? Acquitted for all of the things based off of what we were told was going on and what he knew was the truth. So maybe to clarify a few things so that our audience can feel safer about Tracesafe and what they can look forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we take a few cues from different things. When we think about safety, and we think about what makes people safe, and certainly there's many people who maybe come to this conversation today and are thinking about this conversation, and they've been in a situation where they understand safety at its core. So maybe you've served in the military, you've served in some branch of that. Maybe you're a parent, and so safety means to you this whole ability of how do I keep people out of danger's way, and what is the combination of those types of things. And this isn't just theory, this is practice in every sense of it. And what it boils down to, I think, is is, two fundamental things. It's first, we approach this with trust. So we have to be able to trust those people around us. If I'm a parent, I'm trusting that, we're taking, safe actions together, that, we're working together to keep each other safe in our household or as we're out and about. If I'm in the military or in the Navy or some branch that is, known for this particular area, I'm looking out for other people to this level that goes beyond just a basic sense of trust. I could take that one step further, and I think about, the manager to the employee relationship, or I think about this in terms of, my government's responsibility, towards this too. And there's a point at which I take where I want that trust to extend, but I don't want them following me around everywhere I go. The second aspect is a sense of cooperation. And cooperation means, that we are in this together, that we're only as good as the lowest common denominator in this sort of thing. If there is a breach of anything, let alone trust, that things are going to fall down with this. Mm-hmm. And so when you approach this sort of concept of whether it's getting back to sport or whether it's getting back to the workplace, I believe that you have to bring these two elements back. The employer has to trust the employee to do what's well. There has to be a level of cooperation. If an employee is going to show up and say, you know what, I really don't care about this, I don't believe this COVID stuff, I don't think this is going to spread, I'm going to take haphazard action, I'm going to let my guard down, and things are likely going to go more wrong than they would in other situations. And so it's different things like, what are we going to do together to get through this? And then I think that the other part of it is that, how do we make this sort of utilitarian enough for all of the people around that? And so we kind of took those two aspects and we said, how can we apply trust? How can we provide cooperation? And for us, it meant that we wanted to be able to say, okay, just like now I'm walking into a workplace and I may have to fill out a questionnaire. Who am I seeing? Where am I going? What's my meeting with? Who's my meeting time with? That there's maybe some application. And so we looked at this from a standpoint of, would people wear a temporary wristband? Would they be able to say, I'm walking into the building through that? Or it's like an ID tag. Could I put something on an ID tag that would allow me to come in for the portion of time that I'm visiting this office or this particular location? But once I leave, you don't need to follow me around anymore. I don't need to have this app always running in the background or in the foreground as it may be. But basically, we no longer need to have that barrier. But what I would like you to do is, if you feel sick in the next 10 days or 3 days or 14 days or whatever it might be, that we have a way to be able to alert our employees or to alert those that are affected. Does that make sense?
100%. And now when somebody leaves that facility or that venue, how would they be able to know how, tell us more about how the system keeps the individual's information at bay while serving the functionality of the, what we're doing here with Tracesafe?
Yeah, so let's maybe use the example of a sports venue and a sports game. So just as this morning, where the announcement of Big Ten football is going to return in October, and now we're going to be not just putting people in venues, we're taking this big leap. I mean, there's some big stadiums. I'm sitting here in Canada, and we're not quite as used to college football necessarily, but I have had the occasion in the last few years to partake in some amazing games at Tennessee and Mississippi and Alabama and that sort of thing. And so I've seen how many people get packed into that. I've seen how that people are just enthralled with high-fiving and hugging and all that sort of stuff. So how we look at a solution like that would be, again, this is going to be a time frame period. So perhaps the game lasts for 3 hours. What we do in our situation is that, and I apologize for those that are just maybe paying attention audibly on this and don't see the visual, but I've got a wristband here, and it looks like a temporary wristband, and it's got a Bluetooth chip that's going to be in this. As I'm walking up to my venue and I'm coming into that game, I have the ability for every fan, regardless of how old they might be, 4 years of age or now 90 years of age coming to that game. They may not have their mobile phone on them, but we could put this wristband on them that's going to be hypoallergenic and waterproof and all of that sort of thing. It's going to be able to be taken off after the game is over and that sort of thing. We walk into the venue. I go and I sit in my seat, and perhaps I'm attending with my family, and so different wristbands can be grouped together. But essentially what we're going to do with this wristband is for any period of time back to the distance that we would apply, and so maybe that distance is 2 meters or maybe it's 2 feet. If we're 2 feet apart from each other, or if we're in proximity of like 2 feet for more than 2 minutes long, that our wristband is going to talk to the other wristband, and that connection is going to be made. By the time I pass through the entrances or the exits of those gates, the information is now going to transition from the wristband up into a gateway, and the gateway is going to notify that these people or these wristbands were in combination with each other. It's not going to have identifiable, features to it. It's not going to say that Gord and Keith, were connected with each other, and Ira was there, and all of a sudden we're all having close times at the football game together. It's identifiable by a wristband serial number that's associated with this. And so after the game is over, I leave, I destroy my wristband, but I've got the notification elements, I've got the serial number from this wristband. And the notification goes up. If you feel sick, if you feel like you're symptomatic, or you've got, some concerns that are cropping up, we invite you to come back in, upload the serial number, and we will notify the people however many people that there are, that somebody with symptoms may have come in contact with you for a period of time at the football game. So no need to spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt through the 80,000 people that are in the stadium, but rather to curtail it to just those people that potentially would be affected.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I can't wait to come back, but we are up against the break. And we've been listening to Gord Zeilstra from Tracesafe. We're talking about contact tracing and social distancing and technology and how it fits into the HR world and the future and beyond HR, how it fits into our day-to-day lives, even if you want to get back to a football game. You've been listening to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. I'm with Keith today. We're actually in different places, but Keith Campagna, my co-host, is with me. We're going to take a short break. We're going to hear from our sponsors, Zor.ai and Success Performance Solutions. So stay right where you are. We'll be back in less than 2 minutes.
Imagine how your company would grow if your candidate experience earned a 99% approval rating. Well, to get to 99%, you need the 3 best letters in recruitment technology, XOR. Zor's text bots, chat bots, and audio bots increased IKEA's candidate conversion rate 455%. Zor decreases candidate drop-off rates, improves your candidate experience, and collects analytics for future strategies. To learn more, check out Zor.ai. That's XOR.ai.
Hiring top talent shouldn't be left up to the roll of the dice. And yet, that's exactly what many organizations do. They roll the dice, cross their fingers, and pray for a better outcome. Hiring the right employees the first time is much too important and way too costly to leave to a game of chance. Your employees and your customers deserve better. For 25 years, Success Performance Solution has been helping small and medium-sized businesses hire smarter. They offer pre-employment and leadership assessments from typing and data entry to C-suite competence. Whether it's production, sales, healthcare, call centers, or management, Success Performance Solutions can help. Visit their website at www.successperformancesolutions.com to schedule a free demo or call 800-803-4303. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. I'm here with my co-host, Keith Campagna, and our guest today is Gord Zeilstra from Tracesafe. We're talking about contact tracing and social distancing. We left off talking about some of the, how it's done. I guess one of the things we did skip over, and just to make sure we're all on the same page, Gord, can you define or describe contact tracing? What is it? There may be some people that have a misconception about what it actually is.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think there's maybe some confusion around the fact of, are we are we tracking people? Or are we really, and that would speak to the fact that we're actually creating a map of their particular journey. And as you know, everywhere that they're going, we're keeping track of them and where they're going with this. And then more specifically, what we're talking about today, and specifically with Tracesafe, which is around, you know, making sure that the people who we're having contact with, that we're respecting the social distancing recommendations that are put in front of us, either by our employer or certainly by governments and other considerations. And that if there is a means where somebody does get sick and has crossed that threshold, be it time or distance, that we have a way of getting in touch with those types of people to notify them of any type of concern or situation that they should take upon themselves, like getting tested or going to a hospital or clinic.
So how, I would assume, and again, you're worldwide, correct? I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it has the, you know, and I know there's there's debate around the world, but there's certainly debate in the U.S. About this. We have the people who believe, you know, in it, and there's the other group that believes even wearing a mask is a threat to our personal freedoms and so forth. And I don't want to politicize this, but has the acceptance of contact tracing globally been higher than the U.S.? Or, you know, obviously there's countries that impose it upon people. I mean, in Hong Kong, I mean, for instance, I had some friends that were just there, and as soon as they get off the plane, they get a wrist. And they're called 3 times a day. They're tracked. They cannot leave their apartment. I'm not sure that would ever, obviously, even wearing a mask is threat. So in the U.S., that would be a huge debate. But you know, what's your sense of where this is globally? Are people accepting contact tracing as a way of life, or is it still pretty much a challenge?
Well, and I think that, you know, the political conversation is certainly one thing, and not to be dismissive of it. I think that, you know, the types of organizations and people that we're having conversations, you know, initiated from are folks that, you know, need to solve a very significant problem. And some of that is really ROI driven. You know, what damage is being done to, you know, number one, you know, my employees not returning to work? You know, are we able to continue to serve the customers that we have? You know, perhaps in some situations there's a supply chain that's at risk here. And I think specifically of food, or I think, you know, of precious metals or you know, mining and forestry needs and laboratory needs and things like that. To have the impact of an office or a warehouse or a factory, you know, be shut down or potentially shut down is an economic one. It is a people one. It is a health and wellness one, and it kind of extends through that. And it doesn't have to be political. You know, certainly from a standpoint of, you know, making the debate around risk, you know, of face masks or anything else like that. There is a consideration of, you know, people saying, I don't want to do it, or I don't have to do it. And I would say, you know, we're looking for a way to be able to provide a solution where people can feel safe, number one, so that everybody would be tracked if in fact they do have the virus. And then we tell people to stay home, but we don't have to shut down entire plants. We don't have to shut down entire supply chains. But to answer more your specific question, when we approach it that way, this has had the same sort of pockets of uptake around the world. There's literally not been a part of the region that has been left out. I mean, I can tell you that my day starts every day in talking to somebody in Mongolia, then I move through to Singapore, then I move through to India, and by the time my day ends at the end of the night, I'm usually talking to somebody in Singapore. It kind of moves throughout the globe, and I have different types of conversations with different organizations, but I do believe that this is a universal problem, and it's being confronted in different ways, you know, very specifically here in the United States and North America.
And I want to dig a little bit deeper here because, again, you have that HR background. You're not some sort of Silicon Valley tech group that's trying to validate their super, you know, artificial intelligence bot. You're coming from so with that in mind, how do you see an effective collaboration with the senior levels inside of it could be a global organization, could be a local organization, and how does HR get to help shape that the deployment maybe of Tracesafe?
Yeah, so we see some really interesting, starting points in the conversation. So we do have, HR as an initiator of this, and HR, taking ownership of the fact that, this is as important as, time and attendance and payroll. It's as important as making sure that, people are not only at our location, but where in our location are they? Do they need to be having the interactions, or can we look at sort of, less people having to be in the office, or that, those people that feel more safe at home and sporadically, coming into the office on different off days. But it allows for different strategies to come into play as it relates to HR. And I would even say specifically on that wellness conversation that I could return to. But we also see other uptake from facilities and from administration as well. So if I'm the person in the organization that looks after our real estate, or looks after, where desks are and who has access to different floors and materials, that this makes perfect sense for them too, because I think about my workplace as who's allowed in and who's allowed access in and out. And then furthermore, I can kind of take this to another level that, I might have IT involved, because IT needs to look at the privacy and the security element. That's going to have this, and certainly that is a profound conversation that we have, especially in Europe, but more mainstream around the world now, where people's personal data is very important. So how we anonymize that content, how long do we host people's information, and when they came into the office, these become important conversations. So we have that intersection point, but I would say, by and large, this is a senior leadership conversation. That's what's really interesting to someone like me, who has sold, recruitment software, performance software, payroll, and a lot of sort of HR data, where I would say, we've been struggling to allow our leadership to really understand the ROI that's associated with this. This is something that senior leadership absolutely understands, because the moment that we shut down work, the moment that we shut down offices, the moment that we shut down all of these other access points for our customers to access our talent, we no longer have a revenue stream. We no longer have a support stream. And so the C-level is absolutely involved in this, if not, sometimes initiating this conversation.
You've been doing this for, a couple months. It was obviously the pandemic was somewhat of a surprise to everyone, although, it was anticipated it was going to happen sometime, but it just wasn't going to happen in 2020. Has there anything that's happened that surprised you, that caught you or your company, your team off guard?
There's not. And I mean, you referenced the Hong Kong situation and landing at the airport. And so we've had a couple of iterations in our company that probably give us a really strong footing on this. I mean, our company started as health tech. So the first application of the wristbands that I showed earlier were literally, in New Zealand hospitals, and hospitals in New Zealand look more like clinics in the United States, smaller operations with specialty services and things like that. So imagine a newborn baby and who's got a health issue, and so they need to be sent off to another facility that provides a specialization. So we put contact tracing wristbands on infants that were being moved throughout New Zealand and ensured that they were attached to their rightful owners as they moved throughout the country. We took that application and we said, hey, as soon as issues started cropping up specifically in Asia, we had an immediate solution to be able to provide jurisdictions like Hong Kong and Singapore, where they've thought about this, intently, because they're an island in some situations, and protecting the feasibility of their island and their citizenry and people who are flying in and out. And so we've provided a solution to those countries, and then we've migrated. So I would say, the surprise has been how this evolution has taken on different forms. We've also had to think a little bit more creatively about how we actually get through COVID and what other applications we can start thinking about this, and where this becomes meaningful to an organization, or how this becomes meaningful for other types of things that come up as well, to provide for the sustainability. So we get to some really interesting conversations with companies on how this can be applied.
Yeah, I bet. That would be that whole other conversation. Well, yeah. So one of our other questions.
That in the musical theater category, maybe.
Honestly, real quick, Gord, how does somebody even start to respond to you when you say, "By the way, here's an idea"? Because it's one of those things. It feels like to me that when someone says, when you present what you can do, there's like 9,000 new questions that they didn't ever think about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like HR technology, we end up getting into this conversation of, can we pilot this, right? Can we roll this out? And just imagine for a second what the potential applications could look like. And as sort of a good salesperson and consultant in HR software, I'd be like, oh, that's really hard to do, because we're looking at rolling out employee software, and it takes a long time, and there's lots of different configurations that we have to think about. In this particular situation, I can absolutely do a pilot. I can send 5 wristbands out. I can send 25 wristbands out and take a look at what it takes to put an office complex or a small location of your very large company, and see how that works and how it all comes together. And so I think that there's a really neat way for us to be able to roll out something immediately for this. But, I was in a conversation this morning where it's like, we're only really as good as the lowest common denominator of your employee. If your employees aren't putting this thing on, if they're not wearing it, back to that cooperation story, then we're probably putting a lot of other employees at risk. And so we want to make this as, utilize the utilization of this has to be as easy, as friendly, as streamlined as possible.
Yeah, I would think so, right? Mm-hmm. There's so many variables there. It's almost like herding cats to a degree, but you have to start somewhere. And to Ira's point, right? But we have to move forward. We have, it feels like this limbo thing is going to wear thin sooner than later. I mean, we're coming into Q4 right now. I wonder how many sales organizations out there are actually thinking, let's see what happens, versus we need to sell our asses off, right? So at some point, something besides nothing has to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think waiting this thing out, which is a strategy, sadly, that some will do, and they'll just sort of say, you know what, this thing's going to blow over. And I think, if you just follow the news and you kind of play back the news, you hear about how it really hasn't. Here we are, and I'm a father of 2 school-age kids, and it's kind of this return to school has not been awesome for a whole lot of reasons. I mean, it's first of all, mixed messaging. Second of all, you're managing a different type of dynamic of, skewed scheduling and who's allowed to come into the building, who's not allowed to. Certain kids don't feel comfortable in going into the school environment either. Just that on its own. And you think about, we're many months away from when this started. And a lot of organizations are still trying to figure it out. And I think, a lot of this is we really have to start planning to put a very strong, predictable plan in place. And that's where we're coming into the conversations now. And it's like, we can't wait this out. So
there was a question. We just have we're getting toward the end. So just want to get everybody's thoughts on this. A question came in, are people going to think this is another way to be tracked? And I think we talked about that earlier. What's your sense, Gord?
Well, so no, I think this is more like, we're looking at combining different ways of utilizing form functions that are familiar and utilized to people. So if I take the office environment, today it's really hard to get into an office complex without registering first with the admin at the front desk and putting your information and your contact details and all that sort of thing. What if that could just be a singular experience? And so now what's happening is you're coming in and you're putting a wristband on. So that takes on the same sort of consideration. If I'm going to a football game, to be able to apply a wristband that could serve as my ticket as well. So it's kind of like I was already being tracked when I was going into the football game. You knew where I was sitting. And now this is a situation where we're able to, if somebody does get infected, that they're able to notify you, and not any more than that. It's not about finding a new mailing list or advertising in a special way or doing all of that sort of thing. It's literally single purpose for your health.
I think you just gave us some insight into what some of those conversations are.
Yeah.
Hey, here's what's next. So, I get my ticket in the mail, and it's going to track me all the way from my home to the event, right? Hey, Gord, we can be talking about this forever. Definitely got to get you back on. This is going to be an ongoing story for sure. We always talk to our guests of what's going to happen, 12 months from now. What are we going to be talking about? I'm sure we're going to be talking about this or some variation of that. How can people get a hold of you now to learn more about contact tracing, about Tracesafe, and about you?
Yeah, best way. You can come and visit us on our website. So we're just Tracesafe, TraceSafe.io. So tracesafe.io. And my email address is Gordon, Gordon, at tracesafe.io.
Absolutely. And I know you're on LinkedIn as well, so you can get connected there too. Any final comment? We got you have about a minute. So.
Oh no, I really super appreciate this opportunity to speak with you. It's this is a fascinating time as you led off the conversation with. It's some of these things where we're taking cues in the workplace, and I know many of your audience members are thinking about this as it pertains to the workplace, but we're taking our cues from sport. We're taking our cues from, mass events, concerts, and things that people have gone to by choice and for fun and for entertainment. And, these types of aspects become super important to getting through this thing together, but it also kind of flows through into work and being able to apply some of these different things that we can utilize, very, very responsibly. And also with some fun and some good conversations and some great, strategy and innovation at the same time, and apply this to work. And so I think that this is the future of wellness. I think it's looking after our employees, but our employees and being able to track how that virus may have spread, so it doesn't bring down our business to a halt. It doesn't stop us from economic activity. So we're really excited about being part of Company's future for that.
We'll definitely be continuing the conversation. Thanks so much, Gord. It was fascinating. It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Keith, we keep tackling some very, very interesting topics, and how relevant was this? This was fantastic. Thanks for bringing him on the air.
Incredible. I mean, this is juicy, right? This has got future of work. It's got HR. It's got innovation. It's got all of it. And you and I, hey, if Frank Diana, former guest who's a futurist, would say, I don't know what's going to happen. You and I don't know what's going to happen, right? And it's incredible to think that there's this, and it almost goes back to what Alan told us, right? Another economic forecasting guest of ours. There's going to be so much that comes out of COVID that, as COVID was kicking off, we wouldn't have a clue. And this is an exciting topic that'll be around for a while.
Oh, yeah. And again, accelerating a lot of things we were talking about and creating a lot of new opportunities, too. A couple of announcements here you saw before just a few minutes ago scrolling across the screen. I've launched a couple new live webinars. We're going to be talking in 2 weeks. You can go up to crowdcast.io/Ira Wolf. There's 2 events posted there. One is about how to grow your team. It's a great time. We talked about skilling to open the show, reskilling, upskilling, learning, unlearning. That's what we're going to be talking about. One of the platforms that are available. Going to be doing a webinar on your candidate experience. This is all FCD'd up. The frustration, confusion, disappointment, distraction. Probably my 2019, 2020, before conventions went off, one of the most popular topics. So we're talking about candidate experience. And we're also kind of a new special event. Ed Gordon, who was a guest we had, not on this show, but on another live stream I did. He did quarterly. He's going to do a monthly Gordon report. He did it as a newsletter for the last 10 years. We're now going to be doing it live. Every once a month on a Friday. So a lot of good stuff. Keith, final word.
Thank you. And congratulations to you. You made the number 2 position
number 2, Thinkers 360 global thought leader and influencer. So.
Global HR thought leader, my man, Ira Wolf. And we're just getting started. Thanks to Zor, Success Performance Solutions. This has been great. I can't wait for the next one.
Yeah,
thanks.
You've been listening to Geeks Geezers and Googlization show. I'm Ira Wolf with Keith Compagna. Don't let the shift hit your plan.